Good evening, I'm Christie Max Williams, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the October edition of this, the 22nd year of the Arts Café Mystic. Tonight's show will be that rarest of species and all Connecticut program. And if you're wondering why you persist in living in this funny little state, you may be interested to know that the first ever telephone book was issued in New Haven in 1878 and included 50 names. Don't you wish for such a day? And did you know that the Scoville Library in Salisbury was the nation's first ever publicly supported free library, only in Connecticut? And did you know that Mary Keyes of South Killingly was the first woman to receive a patent in 1809 for weaving straw with silk? Did you know that cattle branding in the United States began when farmers in Connecticut were required to mark their pigs? Did you know that Connecticut is home to the oldest continuing newspaper, the Hartford Courant, of course, but in Hartford, you may not in any circumstances cross the street while walking on your hands. Connecticut was home, of course, to the first Polaroid camera, the first helicopter, first color TV, but also, brace yourself, Connecticut was home to the first ever hamburger in 1895. It's true. And Connecticut state insect is the praying mantis. And the first ever automobile law was passed in Connecticut, making the speed limit 12 miles per hour. And above all, Connecticut was one of two states never to ratify the 18th Amendment. Prohibition. Now tell the truth, isn't this the reason you come to the Arts Café Mystic? For those of you somehow new to the Arts Café, our mission is to present the nation's most celebrated poets and writers, along with New England's finest musicians, in programs that lift your spirits while deepening your minds. And if we have a little fun along the way, God help us. So on with our show. Michael Cervas, who is our opening voice, returns to the Arts Café with a new book, his third, called A Wilderness of Chances, which sees an already strong and accomplished artist making what I perceive as a beautiful leap forward. Mr. Cervas, you'll want to know, grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where coincidentally some of my people hail from, which of course proves once again that we all have to be from somewhere. Somehow, by way of Notre Dame and a PhD from Brown, Mr. Cervas became a teacher by trade, who has taught English for many years at Westminster School in Simsbury, where according to a teacher evaluation I found online, he is considered a hard but cool teacher. Another review, even a memorable teacher, and a third, yes, one of his students remarked that the guy was so interesting and so animated, he made freshman grammar interesting. We'll see. Some years ago, to see if he was properly motivating his creative writing students, Mr. Cervas undertook some of the poetry writing assignments on his own, and thus found his second vocation. The well-crafted poems in A Wilderness of Chances reveal a life-loving, curious, and passionate intelligence. These are poems that fearlessly engage the emotional texture of life. They come to terms with an attention to life's comic absurdities, yet also with a sense of affectionate engagement. There is in these poems a plain tenderness for family and friends. You might even say that A Wilderness of Chances is a book-length love poem, sincere, direct, but usefully offbeat. But see for yourself as you join me in welcoming Michael Cervas.
So I see why you guys come here. I mean, that's the whole evening. What do you need more than that? Facts about Connecticut that you never knew. Thank you, Christie. It's incredible that he remembered this stuff from the last time I was here. All that stuff in the introduction was like years ago. But thank you. I'm staying young, I guess. But anyhow, my job as the opening voice is to ease the audience into the evening. And prepare you for an outstanding singer-songwriter and the new Poet Laureate of the state of Connecticut. So I'm going to do that by starting with a pretty easy little poem. It's about math. So I'm going to ask you to do a math problem while you're listening to this poem. Pretty easy. It's called How Things Add Up. My daughter's pretty good at math. She's participated in math Olympiads since 3rd grade. And we tease her sometimes by calling her a mathlete. A couple of weeks ago, she brought home a problem that she, her mother, and I all tried to solve. You have exactly $100, all of which you have to spend to buy exactly 100 animals. Dogs cost $15, cats go for $1 apiece, while mice are positively cheap at 4 for $1. And you have to buy some of every animal. I sat at the end of the wooden table, using what little I remembered of vector analysis, to begin working through all the possibilities, while my wife got out a big piece of paper and diagrammed her way towards a solution. I could tell we were in for a very long afternoon. My daughter just sat between us thinking, moving around the numbers in her head. A minute later, she cried, "I've got it," and calmly showed us how 3 dogs, 41 cats, and 56 mice will eat up precisely 100 of our dollars. With the problem solved, she skipped off to play or watch a little television. But I stayed right there, staring pensively out the bay window at the darkness starting to settle in for the night. Somewhere, under the snow that hides our gardens, lies our old cat, Charlotte. I buried her there last fall before the ground froze, wrapped in an old baby blanket. While the ashes of our crazy dog, Callie, were scattered 3 winters ago now in a field in a valley beyond the trees. The mice live mostly inside the walls down in the basement. Or at least they did until last summer, when our older child, home from college, gave us 2 new kittens she'd gotten free from the pet store. A history of trouble yet to be written, but worth far more than $1 each to the little girl with a head for numbers. And so it goes for all the animals of Earth. 2 replace 2, even though we know that every one is ultimately irreplaceable, and all the dollars and children disappear in the ineluctable adding up of things. Thank you. One of the great things about coming this far from Simsbury is that there's no one who knows me here. So I can read all kinds of poems that I can't read back home, especially with my students. You know, you've got to sort of have a higher bar. So with you guys, I'm going to have a low bar. I want to read a few poems from the new book so you get a flavor for that, and then I'll read a couple from the earlier books before I turn the program over to other artists. This next poem is based in the fact that I love the game of squash, and I play 4 or 5 times a week. It's a wonderfully intellectual and physically challenging game, and it's been a source of metaphor and poetry for me in all three of my books. So I wrote a poem, it's called On Selecting a Playing Partner, that I thought was a poem about squash, until I started tinkering with it and revising lines and playing with words and images, and I realized it was about a few other kinds of games that we play that I don't need to talk about right now because you're a sophisticated audience and you will get it. So it's called On Selecting a Playing Partner. New ones are exciting, of course, full of delightful surprises and unexpected moves. Shots bouncing every which way off the walls. With them, it's a little like playing for the first time. Your senses heightened precisely because you don't know what the outcome will be or how to orchestrate the game. But there's comfort and danger in the old ones too. Those who know your every weakness, who've learned to anticipate your cross courts and drops, who can deceive you without your even knowing it. With them, the game is decidedly less verbal, more a matter of feints and dodges and subtle touches. So it's a poem about squash. That's what I tell my students. Just a poem about squash. The original title of this book, I can't believe I'm going to say this. The original title of this book, A Wilderness of Chances, was A Plain White Van. And that's because one of the poems is called A Plain White Van. And I thought it was such a clever title. You know, like a van delivers stuff, and my style is pretty much accessible and plain. I thought it was a brilliant idea. I even got the photographer whose photographs grace this book and are really absolutely beautiful, to agree that she would Photoshop a plain white van with the title A Plain White Van on it. My editor and publisher, Rennie McQuilkin, I think he had some doubts from the beginning, but before long he convinced me that was not a very good title for the book. But interestingly enough, you will hear it. The title for the book comes from a line from that poem. So here's the poem, Plain White Van. So now I'm daydreaming my way along the Mass Pike, at the tail end of summer, another school year looming ahead of me like some immense, inexorable cold front, filled with all the usual and not so usual storms. When I glance to my left and see a plain white van passing me soundlessly, as if out of a dream, floating motionless, driverless for all I can tell, without any identifying marks except a telephone number in enormous black block letters along the side of the van. Call 1-800-RENEWAL. And just like that, I am locked into the road thinking, yes, that's exactly what I need. Renewal for the muscle pull that's tweaked my sciatic nerve, for the absence of spirit threatening to paralyze me, for the whole world's weariness. Yes, I want to start over, to be driving steadily into a wilderness of chances that can only come once in a lifetime. And somehow, it's heartening to know I'm only a phone call away from my new life. Thank you. Christie, thank you for reading the book. I mean, that's a real honor for a poet to know that someone has read his book or her book thoughtfully and can speak of it intelligently. That's probably going to be the best honor of the night for me. Although if I sell a few books, that'll be good too. But no, thank you so much. And it really is, it's an extended love poem, it really is. And some of it's family related. And so I'm going to read a family poem that came late. It's a relatively new poem. Rennie insisted that it be in the book, even though it was a very late addition to the book. It's called My Father's Last Words. After lunch, on an unusually sunny February day, my father suddenly clutched his chest and fell forward at his desk in the corner of a fledgling travel agency in Westview, Pennsylvania. Just something to do after he'd lost his job as an engineer, and maybe a sort of fulfillment of a childhood dream to see the world beyond the tiny boxed-in houses of Troy Hill. My sister-in-law heard him say something just before he collapsed, his face landing on the map he'd stretched out across his desk. I'd like to think he'd been sailing in his mind from island to island over the wine-dark waters of the Aegean, planning a summertime trip with my mother, maybe, when a bird flew across the store's front window in a dazzle of light so bright he rose up for a moment to follow it, feeling the heavy weight holding him down just disappear, turning slightly and saying, "Thank you." So that's a kind of way to honor my father. I do that in poems. I hope that they become universal ways for other readers to honor their parents and think of their parents. Now I'm looking out at the audience here, and I'm feeling that you guys have probably dealt with this with children growing up, the annoying age. You know what I'm talking about. Teenagers especially, preteens sometimes with girls. Man, I've had 2 girls. Once they get to be like 9, it's over. Anyhow, so the poem is called The Annoying Age. She's 13, almost 14 now. On the way to school this morning, she told me, with the absolute ennui of the enlightened, that I'd finally reached the annoying age. And so here I am, ostracized to an island in the Arctic Sea for the 3rd time in my life, where none of my jokes will be funny and nothing I say can ever be wise, at least for the next 8 years or so. I've been through this before. I'll be a part of her life, but only in my capacity to annoy her. Good thing I know how this story will end. Even fathers find their way home again. So, thank you very much. Christie's given me a chance to read one more, so I'll read the final poem in the new book, Wilderness of Chances. The poem is a kind of love poem in a sort of way, and I hope that you will appreciate it that way. It's called In Love Again. Watch how sweetly they position themselves, side by side on the couch, their bodies barely brushing against one another. Listen as he says tenderly, "Can I get you a cup of coffee, Mommy?" These are my in-laws, and I've known them for over 40 years. In all that time, I've never witnessed any signs of deep love between them, not even a flash of the desire that must have sparked when they first met. As long as I've known them, they've always slept in separate rooms, living as if they were roommates or cousins. But now, after the cancers and the chemo, the thyroid operations and bypass surgeries, now, when she has trouble remembering the facts of her life and he cannot walk more than a dozen feet on his own, now they have fallen in love again. Acting like shy teenagers, holding hands and making eyes. It is a wonder to me and a flicker of proof that all is not lost in this world. Or maybe that what has been lost can be found again. Thank you very much.
Michael Cervas, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to announce that we actually have all of Michael's books on sale tonight, including A Wilderness of Chances, which does feature gorgeous photos of lotus blossoms by Jane Tomasello Toner. Thank you. It's a superb book. But of course, if you buy the earlier books, you may find out what you need to know about Testerex. There must be some detail in there. This gives me a chance to thank our friends at Bank Square Book for their support. Mystic is lucky to have so hip and friendly a bookstore. I also want to thank the Mystic Arts Center, soon to be the Mystic Museum of Art, for welcoming the Arts Café again. Our community is lucky to have such a resource, and we are grateful to feel at home here. So, on with our show. The Arts Café is, of course, well known for the famous poets we present, but I tell you, we are at least as proud of the music that we put before you. And when we have the good fortune to come upon new music that we think should grace your attention, we feel ourselves very lucky indeed. We have never felt luckier than tonight in introducing you to Kerri Powers. Ms. Powers is the celebrated blues and roots singer-songwriter whose work has been compared to Lucinda Williams, Roseanne Cash, Bonnie Raitt. Good conversation, good company to be in. She is, however, a New England-born and bred musician. She has thought of herself as a musician since childhood. If there is such a thing as having music and words in one's DNA, she's got it, with Bing Crosby as a distant relative on her father's side, and Herman Melville on her mother's side, and a grandmother who played piano to accompany silent movies. Ms. Powers had a celebrated debut album in 2001, took time off to have a family, made a big-time comeback with the album Faith in the Shadows in 29, drew notices at the Boston Folk Festival, the Philadelphia Folk Festival, the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, toured Europe, shared the stage with many huge acts, which all culminated this year in a trip back into the studio where she produced a superb new album with her name as the title. Her new songs on the album make for deep and insightful short stories. Her cover tunes are arias of the sort that haunt and penetrate to your memory. My friends, you will consider it good luck to be among those welcoming Kerri Powers.
Had an old kitchen table in the summertime. I was the queen of caffeine in every sleepless night. You said you loved me, I believed what you said. Still drift through some days with your words in my head and in my heart. They pulled me in, cut through the dark with a mystical light, like a train in the night. Hear a baby crying, that was 20 years ago. Hard to believe our boy's grown into a man of his own. Remember the park bench you'd be waiting on. I held on to that hope till it died out in my arms, yet in my heart truth fosters love, charges the dark with a paladin might, like a train in the night. Picked up my mail, you've changed the house, it's good you made your way. close our hearts, hold them in, riding the dark till it trailed out of sight, like a train in the night. Thank you all so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I was so excited when I first arrived. The acoustics in this room are phenomenal. You almost don't need anything mic'd. Ever since I was a young girl, I've had a fascination with the origin of Peeping Tom. I promise not to get into the whole, shrinking thing. So I've been very curious about that. And of course, when you're young, you think, the idea of a peeping Tom's pretty creepy. You get to be my age and you think, I'll take what I can get. Anyway, I certainly did a little research on the whole thing and come to find out Peeping Tom had quite a love affair with Lady Godiva. So it certainly spurred me to write this song. It's called Peeping Tom. I didn't mind at all. Tell the truth, I took a dare before the rain began to fall. You sneaked up behind as I rode ahead, waited by my window till I slipped into bed in a wash of rain and moonlight. Revealed my silhouette. You blew me 15 kisses while I stood there soaking wet. Oh, sweet Lady Godiva, I'm thinking I could love you. I thought I heard you say, hey, hey, hey. Turned away out to a caravan of nightingales, all them women dancing wild. You might get struck down blind, boy, it looks like lightning in the sky. Here comes boy, I'm thinking I could love you. I thought I heard you say, hey, hey, hey. Deep in town, what you gonna do now that the curtain's drawn? I first heard this next song when I was very young. I was probably around 9 years old. And my mother had a Joan Baez album, Diamonds and Rust. And the song was written by Janice Ian. And I just remember sitting in the library of our home and crying when I heard this song. It's called Jessie. I'd like to do this for Christie. Jessie, come home. There's a hole in the bed where we slept. Now it's grown cold. Your face in the place where we lay by the heart, all apart, and it hangs on my heart. I'm leaving the light on the stairs. I'm not scared, I'll wait for you. Hey, Jessie, it's lonely, come home. Jessie, the stairs in the hall calling your stare, and I remember too. Pictures are faded and shaded and gray, and I still set a place at the table at noon. And I'll follow the light on the stairs. No, I'm not scared, I'll wait for you. Hey, Jessie, it's lonely, come home. It's like when you left, I kept it for you. Losing the greens have been recently clean and are seemingly new pages, me and you. We'll follow the light on the stairs. I'll fix up my hair and we'll sleep unaware. Hey, Jessie, it's lonely, come home. Hey, Jessie, I'm lonely, come home. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I sat around one day with a good friend of mine, and I've always kind of been what my mother always called a devil on wheels. Life's so much more fun that way. But I was sitting around with a good friend of mine. We were talking about who we might choose as a guardian angel. And right away I said, Tallulah Bankhead. Do you guys know who she is? I first saw her in Lifeboat when I was very young, and I just really dug her. I thought she was cool. This is called Tallulah, Send a Car for Me. It's about taking a little stroll up to heaven, and what I would imagine would be a black limousine, or a horse and buggy, whatever works. Boots and shirts. Can't wear my alligator boots and shirts. Preacher says all they ever do is drag in dirt. Well, I think I got some dirt, Lord, on a clean white shirt, yeah. Well, I roll up all my chains, suitcase, pawn shop ring. Waiting till Tallulah sends a car for me. I love lighting firecrackers after dark. I love lighting firecrackers after dark. Sun comes sneaking up behind me in the parking lot. Lord, I better kill a spot so I don't get caught. Tallulah sends a car for me. God's golden chariot, the good Lord's lariat wants me. But I'm waiting till Tallulah sends a car for me. send a dozen roses or a candygram. Don't send a dozen roses or a candygram. I'll go out picking daisies with my own two hands. Do the best I can, Lord, I don't want your candygram. Well, I roll up all my changes, suitcase, pawn shop ring. I'm waiting till Tallulah sends a car for me. Hallelujah, Tallulah, send your car for me. I'm waiting till Tallulah sends a car for me. Thank you all so much again for having me. It's been such a pleasure. I do have some CDs available. This is such a gorgeous place. I feel like the Mona Lisa up here. Incredible. And thank you, Christopher, for the wonderful sound. Christy and everyone for having me. I'm going to close out my set with a song that I first heard on a Graham Parsons anthology album. And it was written, the story has it, that Barry Gibb's manager wanted him to write it for Otis Redding. Some of you may be familiar with the song. It's called To Love Somebody. There's a light certain kind of light never shone on me. I want my life to be there with you. Say to do each and every little thing. What does it bring if I ain't got you? Don't know what it's like, baby, you don't know what it's like. Love somebody the way I love you. In my brain, I see your face again, and you know my frame of mind. Why you gotta be it's like. Love somebody, love somebody the way I love you. I'm a woman, don't you know what I am? I live and breathe for you. What else can I do if I ain't got you? Ain't got you. You don't know what it's like. Baby, you don't know what it's like. Love somebody, love somebody the way I love you. You don't know what it's like. Baby, you don't know what it's like. Love somebody, love somebody the way I love you. Love somebody, love somebody the way I love you. Thank you.
I've been looking forward to introducing Rennie McQuilkin to you tonight. Let's dispense with the usual career notes. Rennie McQuilkin met his poetry muse as a young student, but it wasn't until trying to teach the stuff that he fell in love with her. Together they have had a long and splendid romance. Indeed, Rennie McQuilkin's work has appeared in enviable venues, including the Atlantic, Poetry, the Yale Review. He's received fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts and the Connecticut Commission on the Arts. His many awards include the Connecticut Book Award, the Ruth Fox Award, and the Yankee Award Series. Along the way, Mr. McQuilkin also co-founded and for many years directed the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival at the Hillstead Museum. He also founded Antrim House Books, where as publisher and editor, he has been honored with the Connecticut Center for the Book's Lifetime Achievement Award. But sometimes the poetry planets align in a way that affirms the value of a poet's life toil while giving cause for celebration. The planets have coincided in this way for Rennie McQuilkin, who has recently been appointed State Poet Laureate of Connecticut and has just published Going On, a volume of new and collected poems that is a true magnum opus, summing up a long career of making important poems. Containing 200 new poems along with the best of Mr. McQuilkin's previous 12 books of poetry, Going On roams the hayfields, woods, and riverbanks of our fair state's countryside, observing, musing, and learning from the natural rhythms of the seasons, the constellations, birth and death. But Rennie McQuilkin is not a nature poet, no more than is Robert Frostsay or Seamus Heaney, two poets with whom he holds many qualities in common. Though Mr. McQuilkin's poems breathe deeply of place, they are populated by family, friends, and townsfolk whose foibles and eccentricities are reported with fond tongue-in-cheek humor, even as their sorrows and decency touch the reader's heart. These are plain-spoken poems, as you'll hear, yet meticulously crafted with a kind of workmanship that makes a quiet and shimmering art. No angry shouts or self-pitying whimpers here, no emotional fortissimo. In Mr. McQuilkin's poems, painful memories are processed through brave and honest reflection. Each new realization feels earned. With the understatement and stoicism typical of the New England farmer, these poems seek and find deep insights. And it is the poet's craft that makes these insights feel discovered by the poet at the very moment we as readers discover them. But let's discover for ourselves by welcoming Rennie McQuilkin.
You may have noticed I am not walking on my hands, much less on water. Am walking here to celebrate 21 and now going on to 22 years of the Arts Café, when the music of poetry and the poetry of music, at which we've just heard both very good examples of, has been walking on its feet and doing a certain amount of walking on water as well. I'm not sure that mine are going to do as well, but there have been so many here that have done that. And we go back to 1994 when I think Melanie and Christie had the brilliant notion of putting poetry and music into this beautiful arts cafe setting. And Melanie herself for what, 10 or more years? 10? Yep. And Christie now have carried this wonderful event forward. So thanks to them. And I also want to thank Christopher for the kind of sound system that you may not realize is working so beautifully until you don't have it, and then you know. I can tell just from this microphone how beautifully it is working. So I'm going to begin with, and I also want to say how much I enjoyed that poetry of music of Kerri's and that music of poetry of Michael's. I don't know why I'm even going to bother to go on here. We could stop right now and be extremely happy, but I'll harangue you a little bit. I'm going to start with the beginning, a poem which goes back to those early days when milk came up this front steps, back steps, with the milkman in the metal crate, and you heard the bottles rattling, and the milk was put on the stoop, and if it was freezing out, you know, the milk froze up above the neck, and it pushed the cap up with the cream at the top, of course, and so forth. So this has a little of that era in it. It's called Morning. Lying alone in the straight and narrow bed of old age, I work my way down the crooked hall of memory to where it was I went those early mornings, trailing behind me the tattered cloud bank of my blanket. To the room Father had not yet expelled me from, the room with the queen-sized bed and rose-red comforter I slid under as close to Mother as possible, molding myself to the seed curl of her back and shoulder, the sweet tang of her, slowing my breathing to match her own with its long, delicious inspirations, until first light lit the cream of her neck and cheek and day broke in with the rustle of pheasants in the pine, phoebing of chickadees, phew, phew, phewing of cardinals, swish of washing and brushing from the street cleaning truck, and finally the bell sound of bottles set in their metal basket by the Nakoma dairyman. And father would groan, and mother would turn to hold me against the soft of her. And beyond the veil of her hair, the light would grow, and she would take me by the hand along the dark, crooked hall to the back stairs, down to the brightening kitchen, and let me bring in the milk. I'd uncrinkle the stiff paper cap of a narrow-necked bottle, lift the tongue on the tab beneath, pull it from the mouth, love the liquid labor and pop of its release, and lick the cream from its underside, the thick, sweet cream. A memory I knew, but not of what. Thanks. And another rite de passage, a rite of passage, called baptism, featuring a total immersion in a very strange place, a place you wouldn't necessarily want to be baptized or think of anybody being baptized, but this happened. And the poem is called Baptism. Things keep going on the way they do, except that one day, in the middle of nothing, they don't. I remember how hot it was, not a creak from the windmill, and the Fords our folks had come in steamed. We stood around. Our pockets were no place for hands, they said, and wouldn't let us in the dark of the barn, or anywhere God wouldn't be, because the preacher was in the yard to baptize whoever he could in Tatum's water tank. 6 lined up. I envied them the cool of their gowns and the year or so they had on me, but not the way he dragged them under and kept them there so long they bucked like bullheads. Mostly I went along with the hymn book someone pushed at me, until he got to Ellen McGee, held her under and didn't stop, thinking maybe anything that pretty was bound for goings-on. I was ready for something like the cat I had tried to drown and failed, when up she came as sweet and stood for a spell at the edge of the tank, at home in the sky, and her gown, wet through, was true to her, and her face was where the sun had been. I think the secret, and I know many of you are writers, is not writing words but writing images, and trying, as Hemingway was so brilliantly able to allow you, when you finish something, to not remember words so much as images. And that can be not just sights, but sounds and smells and tastes, and that's where the writer has it all over the artist, who we've got all those other things, unless you're a very multidimensional artist. And so the idea is not to say anything about the surround of Ellen McGee's hair, but just show her at the edge of the tank, at home in the sky, and her face is where the sun had been. And you just create that, and then I want you to join me, and that, I think that's also true of poetry. It's a interactive form. It's like a script. You want to give enough, but not too much, and then you join in. So you can yell and shout and do whatever you want. I may shout a little bit tonight, actually, Christie. We'll see. Yeah, I've gotten shoutier. This is a poem that came about when I was in Las Vegas. Not so much gambling as watching gambling. I was fascinated by the gambling. And I watched so hard that apparently I was being watched from the galleries and the other places and was escorted out. I was watching a dealer with absolute fascination at the nimbleness of her fingers and various other things. I was not really trying to learn the system, but They were pretty sure I was. Anyway, I got out of there with a little escort, but not before I had my poem. And so this is called The Dealer. The Dealer. Where neon announces Flamingo Hilton, 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 she deals exquisitely, says little. What's it to her if you lose? She's the house. Except sometimes when a jackpot's splatter of coin is goat's milk in an empty pail, and her fingers, smart as whips with a double deck, forget the deal, feel only the squeeze, release, and squeeze of a teat. She's 10 and no one's property. It's dawn on the ridge with the eggs to collect. If she sneaks one, sucks the yolk, no one will be the wiser. No one will count the chips. And whatever clouds loom are what a child can make of them. Never puffed up, whey-faced supervisors staring down from ceiling mirrors, corner mirrors, catwalks everywhere. We're growing up a little more into a situation that my friend encountered with his father, who stopped speaking toward the end of his life. A big man, he'd been a boiler maker, had lost part of a finger, and he was a very gentle man and a very silent man, and toward the end of his life spoke almost not at all. And this is about that man and what he did for my friend. And it's called Lines for Dick Whitty. It's only glass I've broken. Mother goes on, licking a thread, pushing it at the eye, face bunching like a club, then heaves out of her chair and begins to hit me with a magazine, and when that shreds with her fists, I can't forgive my father for hiding behind the paper. A big man, twice her size, as usual, he lets her happen. Doesn't say a thing. She does the talking in that house. My father is her cross, she says. I can't forgive him for not knowing better. And hide in the shed among the tools. Today he comes for me, has nothing to say, just shows me to the car. We reach the river, and in the trunk beside his rod, I find a brand new Hedden Truflex with a Shakespeare reel. From his tackle, he selects a green ghost and royal coachman. How delicately, with a huge hand battered and missing a finger, he threads the silk through the shining eyes. All afternoon we work the trout. The only sounds are those that slowly grow used to us, and the high song, long whisper of lines. First his, then mine, then sometimes together, the lines arch out and settle exactly where we want them. And I don't know if one should confess things, but it interests me that what writers do is not always exactly relate the literal truth. What actually happened in this case with the father was that the father did everything but take him to the river. He gave him the tackle box, he gave him the rod, but he never took him to the river, so I thought I should finish what his father wanted to do. And that's more true than what actually happened. So this is what should have happened and what did happen. In my mind, it did happen. This is a poem from my mother. The Lighters. In her 89th year, she's reducing her inventory. China to the children, mementos to the trash, but in her boudoir keeps half a dozen square-shouldered Zippos. On one, her husband's initials, the best man's on another, the rest anyone's guess. Dry-chambered, their rusted spark wheels stalled, they are lined up gravely on a jewelry chest, full of antique gap-toothed keys with elaborate scroll work on their hilts, fit to open high-backed steamer trunks, perhaps the door to a sunken garden, where every night the dry bones come in mothballed flannels and hand-knit sweaters to roll their own, light up. To roll their own, light up like fireflies and sotto voce. Remember her. She was a very quiet woman. I couldn't get her to talk much about her love life. And of course, she was passionately in love with my father, but there were secrets. Now, this is desperation time. I'm going to read a poem I've never read before. I never dared to read it before, but it's been in the book all along, so I suppose it was out there one way or another. You put things out that, I learned more about my mother from reading her poems and she about me from reading my poems than we ever told each other. So you reveal things. I suppose it's in the voice of a sort of a monastic type of person. I can't imagine who it is. A kind of a monkish person fascinated by angels and so forth. Among other things, if nothing else happens, it's one of the nice things about literature. You learn something always from a good novel or a good poem. And in this, you may learn how we got that cleft on our upper lip. How did that come to be there? It's called Learning the Angels. Waiting up, he's deep in angels and archangels. Studying lion-bodied cherubim, principalities, six-winged translucent as cathedral windows, heavily armored archangels, and ordinary angels for the dirty work, recording, hand-delivering, and as he learns, placing a finger on the lips of every newborn, leaving a cleft, imposing silence concerning clouds of glory. Now she breezes in, douses the light, wants to cuddle, undoes, runs a finger along the cleft that gives the tip of his sex its face of a heart. It's devil's work, he knows. But after the dark of it, here he is in the dew-damp garden at dawn, picking strawberries for her, turning the leaves pale side up, uncovering the heart-shaped fruit, and coming on the snake, a hog nose, head up, neck flared and glistening, he knows its lineage, says his prayer to angels, archangels, and wheels of fire. Reinforced, he returns, full of powers and dominions. She yawns, half rises on her divan, plumps a pillow, pours cream on the berries. Its blush deepens. He finds himself sliding a hand beneath her robe along the nape, the shoulders, the spine, the small, that valley lightly downed, which leads to what comes over him. Her shoulder blades working the air, her finger on his lips. You see why I didn't want to read that one. And a little more sedate poem later, a little bit later in life. This poem wasn't really getting finished until I saw something that needed to be in the poem, and I didn't know that it needed to be in the poem, but there was a missing link in it. And what I saw one early morning was the mating ceremony of huge imperial carp. Those they so big they drag on the ground behind you. That's what a fisherman told me. They get to be 3 or 4 feet long. These are not goldfish. These are imperial carp. These are huge fish. And I saw there was what looked like 100 beavers splashing water, huge geysers of water all down the cove in which this mating ceremony was going on, which I didn't know was a mating ceremony until I got farther in, and I saw that the 2 carp were paired up together going through the water, and he was stroking her, and another male would come in, and then there'd be a battle royal, and that's where all the water came from. So that, seeing that was what got into this poem, and I think what was necessary for the poem. It's called Ceremony, Indian Summer, an anniversary song. The afternoon ripens, the whippoorwill begins, 2 dragonflies pause, yellow-striped, red-tipped on a snag, then blur to the pond, resume their ritual, arched bodies coiled tail to head and head to tail, an 8-winged wheel of fire, a figment from Ezekiel. Above the bridal dance of cloud-white wing-furred caddisflies redoubled by the pond. Thistle seed drifts like confetti. And deeper down in the angling light, past nubile perch in green and saffron shallows, a pair of 3-foot carp seem lit from within, the color of the lingering sun. They're roiling in the rising mist of spring, backs humped half out, snake sinuous, forgotten. The stillness of the carp is so complete. Each red gold, black lined scale shines separately. The pulse of tail fins oriental, like the sway of night into day, into night. So there's hope for us. Do you all know the rose-breasted grosbeak? I'm not sure if they come to all bird feeders, but we have some glorious rose-breasted grosbeaks. They come back year after year, and the males have a kind of a heart-shaped red on their chests. Sometimes the heart even drips, and they're black and white and red, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And if you think you've never seen a female, that's because the females are quite different. And it took me a long time to recognize that there were females. The grosbeak male is quite a show-off. This is called Romance of the Rose-Breasted Grosbeak. If you think love is not blind, just listen to him singing his elaborate love song as she takes her pleasure at the feeder she's emptying, selecting only the choicest sunflower seed. Dandy in a black and white zoot suit the morning after, he wears his bleeding heart on his chest. See how the point of it drips. And the object of all his colorful affection is this scrawny, big-beaked, dun-colored little dinosaur tossing seed over her shoulder. Her only bright spot is a pair of white stripes swept back from her beady eyes like the sidebars of the god-awful spectacles on some mousy secretary. Still, the way her handsome boyfriend is ogling her gives me pause. Who's blind to hear? God knows when she takes off those glasses, lets down her hair. Yeah, some of you have you seen Cinema Paradiso lately? And you know what happens to the old 16 millimeter films when they stall, when they jam? and a circle begins to burn out from the middle, and then, of course, if you're unlucky, the whole place bursts into fire, but if you're lucky, you put it out. Anyway, that image gets into this. An old man's sense of time is shot. Now he is 5 in Indian headdress, facing off with the boy across the street. And now he is being born. The frames blur by, his small head crowning, coming to light, is an old man's white on hospital white. Now the film, so quickly reeling and unreeling, jams. It fixes on a single frame. Before a brilliant circle burns out from its center, he sees a sleeping compartment, elegant in the velvet and brass-fitted style of the overnight express from Algeciras to Madrid. He is raising a tasseled dark green window shade on the full Spanish moon. The white of it spills across the cream and umber landscape of his bride. And the little story on Poetry Magazine, that went out to Poetry Magazine, and the proofs came back, and I read them through, and I thought, well, this is good, isn't that nice? And I got to the very last line, and I looked twice. The proofer had crossed the cream and lumber landscape of his bride. I guess he got into trees or something. So. I had a student who was an epileptic, whom I was ready to help in case there should be a need to help her, but you're never really quite ready for that sort of thing. And then it happened one day in class. She was going to recite a poem. She had the book in her hand for safekeeping. The poem she was going to recite actually was Out by Robert Frost, but that, if you know that poem, is just too terrible and too coincidental to put into the poem. But that she had the book in her hand, and she was going to declaim that poem. And I went home that night, and I couldn't do anything else but write to her, for her, or about her, and about the class that had come together after that event in a way that no class I've ever had came together. And I was also carrying around in my head what people in those days were finding out for the first time, but which we know now very well, which is that a ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, of course, comes from the days of what Edgar Allan Poe called the Red Death, or what we call the bubonic plague, because the person afflicted with the plague, the bubonic plague, turned a rose color, and spots developed all over the body, and they would have rings around them, and there would be a ring around the neck, and these people were called, the ring around the rosy is referring to that specifically, and people breathed through flowers because they thought they wouldn't inhale the noxious fumes that would convey the disease to them. And the ashes, of course, cremation fires burning all over every town, whole towns wiped out, whole sections of Europe. So that I was carrying that around, and then this happened in class. And that's, I think, as you all know who are writers, or sometimes two things come together in a way as when sodium and water come together, that the combination is greater than either of the two parts. In any case, it's called We All Fall Down for Kelly, my student. Her turn had come. She knew by heart almost the lines she was to speak, but gave us, God help her, the truth beyond the lines, beyond the book she dropped, its pages thrashing to the floor like broken wings, the truth she beat her head upon, bit into so hard I could not pry her jaws, teeth grinding, the truth beyond us. She saw, as ever, her risen eyes gone white as bone. I did what I could. I held her and held her, seized with sudden love and knowing we all fall down. In the end, I carried her, curled in my arms, across one threshold and another. That's okay. Thank you. I couldn't do anything else that night, and I took it to Kelly, and I said, Kelly, I'm sorry, I won't show this to anybody else. I wrote it. And she said, that's all right. I don't make a secret. It was a petit mal seizure. She survived it very well. It's doing very well today. And as I said, that class that had gone through that experience, I sent them out to early lunch at Miss Porter's school, and then they came back later, and we talked about it. And everything we read from that time on took on new coloration and new importance and new meaning. And that class was the most exciting class I've ever had. So it had a good ending. Sister Marie Angelica plays badminton with Sister Marie Modeste most afternoons. Today, because of lengthy vespers, they are late. A pale moon has already risen, and early bats are darting like black shuttlecocks. Except for the whisper of wings and the sisters' hushed encouragement, the only sounds are the plinking of rackets and a monotone of mourning doves. On all sides of the court, the sculpted yew in cubes and columns might pass for black, so deeply green it grows. And now it moves closer, Marie Angelica would say, who has been known to have visions. Though she moves as aptly as the bats, doesn't miss a shot. When she fades for a long one from Marie Modeste, sways on her toes, arches her back, raises one arm and the other to keep her difficult balance, she is lost. A long-legged girl, again in mare's tail, mullion, milkweed, leaning on the sudden sky as if it can sustain her like a hand in the small of her back. It does. Her nerve ends quick as a shiver of poplar, arms like branches in a wind. She feels a cry begin to rise to force the self before it, and burst, all colors one, that white. It vaults straight up, a feathered cry that hovers in the heart of heaven, hovers, and plummets to the gut of the racket she sights it in. The perfect bird, the shuttlecock, Marie Angelica keeps in play, will not let fall, despite the darkness gathering. Peter Davison at the Atlantic called up one night and he said, would you mind if Mr. Gorey illustrated your poem? And I said, Mr. Gorey? You mean Edward Gorey? And, well, you know, Mystery Theater, that guy. And he did this wonderful, whimsical drawing. And then the book came out with an absolutely hideous drawing of Sister Marie Modeste on the cover of the book. And, I mean, it was really awful. And but I looked at it twice, and Sister Marie Modeste, with whom Sister Marie Angelica is playing, Sister Marie Modeste on the other side of the net, not because the artist was trying to make her face look like a skull, but because it wanted to look like a skull or something. I thought to myself, wait a minute, with whom or against whom is Sister Marie Angelica playing? That was a revelation. St. Joseph's Cathedral in Hartford burned down on New Year's Eve of 1956. It was a terrible fire. It burned to the ground. And a friend of ours was an eyewitness to that fire, and told me the story that's at the heart of this poem. Would that she were here. This is a good thing, good reason for having an index is that I can find out where that poem is quickly. The poem is called Cathedral Fire. There it is. As you know, if you know your Bible, when the Jewish people were involved in the Exodus, heading toward the Promised Land, the Lord went before them a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, or a column of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Cathedral Fire, 1956. When I got there, St. Joseph's was too far gone to be saved. A column of smoke from afar, and closer a pillar of fire. Then the rose window blossomed, exploded. A whirlwind arose, and from the belfry, bells ringing their terrible changes. As the organ fell from the choir loft to the nave, the battering, the heat, something set it chiming, playing its sharps and flats in a fugue of its own creation. May you and I go down with such an explosion of music, a song of songs. I don't know what happened, but it did. The organ began playing as it crashed from one story to another. And, the wind, the firestorm wind set the bells ringing, and it gives you chills. Okay, now a little bit of shouting begins. And the poem is set in Edgartown Harbor, seen from a hilltop, with the yachts out there first at night and then the next day. And it's called Regatta. All night, beneath the stately turn of the slooped and schoonered sky, the yachts rode the star-filled swells expensively. Their halyards chiming that now are under jib and spinnaker. From this hill, this humming top, it might be ivory queens, bishops, kings, gowns billowing, who make their cryptic moves across the mottled bay. Overhead, a skein of swans, wings working up the air to whistle. And this for heraldry, a blue and silver kite, an osprey, a red tail rounding out the sky. How hard to believe in anything less heavenly. But there it is, the dive, direct hit of the hawk, and sudden tangent to the nest, that inner spring of rabbit rib, shrew, skin, quail, down, fox, fur. As for the yachts, the swift, white yachts, how many among us must be taken bone and gut that these may be so sleek? I sent that to a yachtswoman friend of my mother's. I never heard from her. You've all seen this is one I just wrote, the picture of that child on the beach, several pictures of the child washed up, his family having drowned, all but the father, who had to live on with his whole family having been drowned in their attempt to escape, I think, from Syria into, was it Hungary? Or Turkey? Turkey, I think. And the child is lying on the beach. And I think that photograph is probably going to do more good for world peace than any number of protest marches. There was one during the Vietnam War of a young child who had been napalmed, I think, that did the same. And this is trying to make an image. That's what we do as writers, is try to turn something into an image. And of course, as I said, we have the other images of sound and sense and taste and smell at our disposal. It's called Child of War. They are fleeing. They are fleeing. They are fleeing the stench of war, the empty space where their homes once stood. They are fleeing with empty hearts in boats too small for the sea of grief. They are drowning. They are drowning. Here is one come ashore at the edge of the surf. He is 3. He is tucked in, knees folded, hands together, afloat in the womb. He will not wake. He is at peace, the only peace we seem to know how to make. I'm not screaming exactly. Did anybody see a monarch this summer? A single monarch? 1, 2, more than one? They're very few. I didn't see one this summer for the first year. They always come to our zinnias, and I didn't see one. I'm a little worried. They go back to that one valley in Mexico, which is being deforested, and where there can be ice storms, and where, because they're in one place, all in one fairly restricted area. They're endangered, and there are chemicals being used, and things are going on that are not making it easier, and of course the milkweed is disappearing up here. But this is a couple of years ago when the milkweed was still growing and the monarchs were still flying. Let's hope they do again. I cross my fingers. Monarchs, when they return to Mexico, ride the thermals. The way hawks do, they ride up and they glide down, and then they ride a thermal up and they glide down. How they learn to do that is a wonder. It's called visitation. I've been anxious all morning, have come outside to sit by the fall flowers. Shaggy orange and pink and yellow zinnias grown tall for the occasion, beside the rough-hewn slats of a barn-red barn. The day is warming after a touch of frost. The zinnias have made it through and have a collar, an orange-red, black-veined wings rimmed with white dots and yellow oblongs. The wings go from flower head to head, landing, shutting, opening slowly, then folding together like supplicant hands, palm to palm, for the long, deep drawing in, and rising for delighted swags of dizzy flight up and down the length of the barn before lighting on another zinnia. Perhaps this monarch has no bad dreams. Perhaps every shag of zinnia, every beam of light and shade, every slice of sky is a close relation, every zig sensational rehearsal for riding to a height from which to glide to the next updraft, all the way to some Mexico ingrained in the body's half-gram of memory. I drink it all in, storing up for my own long trip to come. I'll do just 2 more. I have one for my Chevy S10. It's, let's see, do the math on this. What is it, 22 years old? 22 years old now, and still going. It's a noble car. It needs to be written about. At least I think I'm writing about it. It's called Holding On for Beam, my Chevy S10. She doesn't stop and start the way she used to. There have been issues with her fluids. Her pressure is erratic, too high, too low, Her bushings are worn, her bottom tender, where time has been added. She's a bit bionic in her parts, but all the better for it. I'm holding on to her for dear life. Oh my God, they don't make them like that anymore. And one last one. We live, and also thanks to, again, to Christie and Melanie and Christopher for making all this possible, and come again next time for what sounds like a grand event. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the background of this poem. We live in an old 1780 farmhouse, which has lots of memories in it. And we are like, I think we are really caretakers. We feel we don't really live here. We take care of the house, and somebody else will take care of it after us and then after them. And with that in mind, I was talking to a termite inspector in the cellar one day, and he had a very rotund, round face. It was dark down in the cellar, but there was a little light coming in from a cellar window. And I asked him what he was finding, and he said, "Oh, it's pretty interesting down here. Some of these little buggers, they've got wings on them, you know, and that's not good." And he said, "Anything else? Any other kinds of infestation in this house that you want to tell me about?" And I said, "Well, nothing much, you know, the usual ghosts. That's all." And there was a long pause, and then I saw this white, round face like a moon rise up from the corner of the cellar. And he looked at me a long time, and he said, "Are they very active?" So it's, you know, it's that kind of an old house. So, so this is called Hands. Hands. Descending from the second story, I steady myself, hand sliding on the handrail, then polishing the knob of the newel. Time has worn away its stain, revealing the rose of earlier days and hints of darker shades below. For over 200 years and 12 wars, such a scoring by hands. In the wash of history, time shrinks. I remember placing my palm on the red ochre print of a hand in a Utah cave, surprised by the almost perfect fit. At the newel, I fit my hand to the backs of other hands that touched its round in passing, hands of lovers ascending, hands of mourners descending, slow hands of the old, quick of the children rushing by, and I feel the hands of those to come, the sad and the joyful, taking their turns, their palms brushing the back of my hand where it rests on the newel.
Rennie McQuilkin, the State Poet Laureate, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Rennie. Thanks also to Michael and to Kerri Powers. What a wonderful evening this has been. Let me remind you that we have books of Michael's, books of Rennie's, CDs of Kerri's on sale tonight if you'd like to take a little memento home with you. We'll return in November with Jill Bielowski. Until then, remember that the Arts Cafe is a tribute to you, my friends. This is community, and doesn't it feel good? Good night.